Hi, everybody. Really gives me tremendous pleasure to be able to connect with you. Although, in a way, I wish I could be there with you, because, you can't hug a camera. I think it's extremely appropriate that this retreat takes place as we approach the Passover season. Something interesting about Passover that we ought to think about. I think that many people think of Passover as a Independence Day. Well, I've got a problem with that because Independence Day to me was 4th of July, which was one day, and you had parades and picnics and firecrackers and baseball games, and everybody had a good time and went to sleep. Passover is more than an Independence Day. Who ever heard of an Independence Day lasting for 8 days? And to prepare for it, you have to make your kitchen surgically sterile. So there's certainly more to Passover than the Independence Day, but I wasn't aware of it. I don't know if any of you had contact with Shlomi. Shlomi was a gentleman who had many years of addiction, and he went through the program, the Rehab program at Gateway, did very well. But I was concerned that if he goes back to New York and establishes contact with his buddies, that he'll very quickly relapse. So I asked him to stay in Pittsburgh. As it got close to Passover, he said, I want to be by my father's Seder. Well, had to take the risk, so he went to New York to be with his father's Seder. And he came back after Passover and he said to me, when my father began reading the Haggadah, and he said, Avadim hayinu, we were slaves. I interrupted my father and I said, Abba, can you truthfully say about yourself that you were a slave? No, you're talking about history. Centuries ago, our ancestors were enslaved in Egypt. But you don't know what it means to be a slave. I can tell you what it means to be a slave, because all of those years that I was in drugs, I was a slave. I had no freedom. I had no choice. The drugs were my taskmaster, and I had to do whatever they wanted. When Shlomi told me that, I became aware of what Passover is really about. It's not a political independent state. It is being a free person, free to make choices in life. We can be slaves to the Pharaoh in Egypt. We can be slaves to any dictator. We can be slaves to any tyrant. We can also be slaves to alcohol, to drugs, to cigarettes, to gambling, to lust, to food, so many things that we are prone to become slaves to, and we lose our choice, and we lose our liberty. And I think what Passover is intended to tell us is how to regain our liberty. And when Shlomi told that, it inspired me to write a Haggadah with a comment, from bondage to liberty. Now, the Talmud says that if you've learned something from a person, anything, you're obligated to honor and respect them as a teacher. And I've learned so much from the recovery program. You are all my teachers. I've learned so much from you. I remember that one day I was watering my lawn in Pittsburgh. A car drove up in front of the house. Two guys jumped out, and they said, "How you doing, Doc?" It was two graduates of the Rehab program. And I said, "Look, I don't want to lie. I have a lousy day today." "You need a meeting, Doc." I said, "No, thank you. I'll do without a meeting today." 8 o'clock that night, the doorbell rings. These two guys were there to take me to a meeting. It so happened that this was a gratitude meeting. And you got to remember, this was a day that I was feeling lousy. And when you're feeling lousy, it's very difficult to be grateful. So the first person got up and expressed gratitude for being sober X number of years and all the wonderful things that happened as a result of recovery. And this is the pattern that went on throughout the entire meeting, everybody giving a toast to their gratitude. And I'm sitting there feeling lousy. The very last person that got up to speak said, "I've been 4 years sober, and I wish I could tell you that it's been good. I lost my job and I couldn't find another job. I fell behind the payments for the mortgage, and the bank foreclosed on my house. My wife divorced me and took the kids. Past week, the finance company repossessed my car. But I can't believe that God brought me all this way now, only to walk out on me now." And then I knew why I was at that meeting. That is what I needed to hear that day. Another wonderful piece of information, another lesson that I got, was from a young woman who was an actress. And she said that she went into the program, went into the rooms when she was 25. Everything in her life had turned upside down. And she gave the story, which is not unusual, and I've heard that story many times. But before she finished, she said, "I just have to tell you one more thing." She says, I am a rabid football fan, and my team is the New York Jets, and I will never miss a game. Well, one weekend I had to be out of town, and I didn't want to miss the game. So I asked the girlfriend to record the game for me on her VCR. When I came back, I went to her, and she gave me the tape, and she says, "By the way, the Jets won." Well, I took the tape and sat down and started watching it. It was horrible. The Jets were being mauled. At halftime, they were 20 points behind. Under other circumstances, she said, I would have been hitting the refrigerator, cracking my knuckles. But I was perfectly calm. I knew they were going to win. And then she said, when I came into this program, and I made a conscious decision to turn my life over to God, I know that it's going to turn out all right. Now, sometimes I'm 20 points behind at halftime. But it doesn't destroy me. I know it's going to turn out okay. That was a bit of information that has helped me so many times when I felt I was 20 points behind at halftime. So, I am so grateful for what I've learned from the program. And I think that the program offers us so much more than abstinence from alcohol and drugs and other things. It offers so much more than even sobriety. You know, we talk about the program as being a spiritual program. What does that mean? No, we are told it's not a religious program, it's a spiritual program. What is a spiritual program? I think that the human being is a physically an animal body. What makes us human is not our intelligence. Animals are intelligent. What makes us human and unique are a number of traits that animals do not have. And that's what makes us human beings. For example, animals cannot choose. Do you realize that animals have no choice? They are driven to whatever attracts them, and they cannot think, is it right or wrong? We have a choice. We may be attracted to do something, and we decide not to do it. We can choose right from wrong. That's uniquely human. We have the ability to delay gratification. We may want something and think, no, now's not the right time for it. Animals cannot do that. We have the ability to forgive. Animals cannot forgive. We have the ability to think about a purpose and goal in life. What do I want to do with my life? Animals can't do that. They are driven by their instincts, and they don't think about what their purpose and goal in life. You know, I was on a safari several times, and I noticed the animals there. I am sure that not one of them are wondering, what am I doing in this jungle? And why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing? We have the ability to think about a goal and purpose in life. You know, it's very interesting. The Torah talks to us about the father of our nation, Abraham, the patriarch. And as he grew old, the Torah says, and Abraham grew old, and he came along with days. What a strange expression. Came along with days. I think we can understand it, because we have to learn how to live one day at a time and to come along with days. I was deeply influenced by my friend John, who worked with me on the establishment of the Gateway Rehabilitation Center. And I said to him, John, how long have you been sober? I don't know. Oh, come on, son, how long have you been sober? Long time? Takes out a little diary. 9,832 days. I said, what is that? 25 years, 30 years? And he said, I don't know. Yesterday was 9,842. If I make it by the grace of God tonight, it'll be 9,843. A number of years later, at age 83, John died, and the night before, he still wrote into his little diary 16,000 less or whatever it was. Taking it one day at a time. And perhaps that's what the Torah means. Abraham came along with days. Not one day was wasted. Every day was accounted for. You know, I wonder if we really appreciate the beauty and the great value and the gift that the recovery program is. I sometimes tell people, do this little experiment. Take a stenographer's pad and go on a busy street corner. And when people walk by, say, may I ask you one question, please? Sometimes people will stop and say, yes, what is it you want to know? And you'll say, have you ever done a fearless moral inventory? What's the reaction? What are you? A missionary? Every once in a while, there'll be someone who says, yes, I am involved with a group where we are told to do a fearless moral inventory. Do you realize that very few people, except for those who are in the recovery program, do a fearless moral inventory? We can get close to it on Yom Kippur, but a regular moral inventory, fearless, and not being afraid to discover things about ourselves, that is a gift of the 12-step program. You know, we are supposed to value truth. There's nothing important in Jewishness as truth. As the Talmud says, truth is the name of God. But how often do we run away from truth? And we convince ourselves that we are right. We call that rationalization. People who are not in recovery may spend their entire lives rationalizing, actually living a untruthful life and not being aware of it. A gentleman who was in recovery for many years said to me, in all of my years of drinking, I never once took a drink unless I decided it was the right thing to do at this moment. That's rationalization. But alcoholics and addicts are not the only people who rationalize. We all rationalize. And when we rationalize, we are lying to ourselves. And we can go through life with a whole pattern of untruth and not be aware of it. Because you see, the rationalizations are often good, but that doesn't make them true. And in recovery, we learn that one lie is enough to precipitate a relapse. And we learn how to be truthful. Not only to be truthful with other people, but truthful to ourselves. And eliminate the rationalization. So let me get back to kind of things that are unique to mankind. We can make a choice. We can decide right from wrong, which animals cannot do. We can delay gratification to a more appropriate time. We can forgive. That is so terribly important. We can have a perspective. And the perspective means, what do we want to do with our lives? You know, thank God I'm 88, and most of my life was behind me. Sure, I have some regrets about things that I could have done differently, but I'm not unhappy about my life. Because my life has a purpose. And in the program, we talk about the 11th step. Right? that through prayer and meditation, increase our conscious contact with God. Praying only for the knowledge to do His will and the ability to do it. Incidentally, when you hear those words, what do they mean to us? What do you mean praying only for the knowledge to do His will? We pray for so many things. Because I've gone through several very painful years. And I pray to God for relief from pain, which is only natural. Whenever we suffer, whatever it is, we pray to God for relief. What does that mean to pray only for His knowledge and for the ability to carry it out? Now that is a tremendously spiritual concept. And the foremost Torah authority, the Zohar, is critical of people who spend the high holidays in their prayer, asking God for personal things. God, give me this. God, give me this. God, give me this. Give me, give me, give me. He says, that's infantile. That's juvenile. What should we be asking for? We should be asking for the ability to do what God created us for. And God has communicated His will to us through the Torah. And what we should be praying for is the ability to observe the Torah to its best. So think about the 11th step when you say it. Praying only for the knowledge to do His will. The Zohar goes one step further. And he says, God is a loving Father. And a loving Father is hurt when his children are hurt. Now, we don't understand why God allows that to happen. But God is in charge of the world. And He is distressed when we are in distress. The story of a chassid, an adherent to a Rabbi, who dealt with lumber. And he came to the Rabbi one day and he was upset because he had bought a forest and the price of lumber fell precipitously. And the Rebbe said, you know, when you're feeling ill at ease, when you're feeling depressed, right, that causes God to feel pain also. So tell me, he says, is it worthwhile to cause God to feel depressed because of a few pieces of wood? That is the ideal pair. We don't know the answers to why God allows pain. And I had so much time to think about that in the past 10 years, and I have no answer for it. But I do know that God is a loving Father, and He could relieve my pain. And if He allows me to suffer pain, it has a purpose. I can't tell you what that purpose is. That's a secret that was kept from me. But it's not purposeless. And so you see, through prayer and meditation, we can come to think about what do we want to do with our lives. And when the time comes to return our soul to the Maker, right, do we feel we have achieved what He wanted us to do? And you know, the teachings of the Torah are so beautiful. But I also found them in the teachings of the 12 steps. In fact, I've often said that if Bill Wilson were alive today, I'd sue him for plagiarism. He took all the beautiful ideas of Mussar and ethics and put them into the 12 steps. A moral inventory, a sensitivity to others. Getting away from a selfishness, which is part of the animal being that we are. You know, at some place the prophet says, we come into the world as a wild mule. Well, maybe that's how we come into it, but we don't have to stay that way. We have the ability to be a mensch, to be a real person, a real human being. And this means consideration of others. We have to overcome our ego drives, not only for sensual gratification, but the drive for power, the drive to control others, which leads to so much misery and so much marital discord when one partner tries to control the other. We can be slaves to many things. If we can't control our anger, then we're slaves to anger. If we can't control our lust, we're slaves to lust. And so that's what Passover is about. And I try to point out how many of the things that we talk about in Passover, in the Haggadah, are actually guidelines on how to free ourselves from the tyranny of our physical self. Animals are not free. We have the ability to be free, and how foolish it is to give it up, to surrender that ability to alcohol, to drugs, to food, to lust, to money, to the desire for praise. All of these kinds of things are animalistic traits, and we can overcome them, and we can be proud as true human beings, not simply intellectual animals, because that's what the science tells us. Science tells us that a human being is a Homo sapiens. What does that mean? Well, in plain English, Homo sapiens is a chimpanzee, a gorilla with intellect. No, we're not that. Yes, we have intelligence, but we know we have the ability to think what to do with our intellect. And if we read the stories of our great people and how they lived their lives, and how they were able to set aside their own drives for the welfare of others, we have the real meaning is of what it means to be a human being, not just a Homo sapiens. So I got many of these ideas in my studies of the various books of Torah, but when I came into the program, I realized how people were making these decisions every day and living beautiful lives. And I get so much gratification from people who call me up and say, "Hey, Doc, yesterday made 43 years. 43 years of improving oneself as a human being? 43 years, 25 years, 16 years. One day at a time. And it can be done. And so, unfortunately, my restrictions, being wheelchair bound, don't give me the opportunity to make as many meetings as I'd like. But it's so important that those of us who are blessed, that we can get to meetings, that we take advantage of being at the meeting and getting some of the tremendous knowledge from people who have learned the hard way. And so, in days past, I would have been with you in that room. I would have said the warmth of your company and the sweetness of your hugs. And shared with you the hope, strength, and courage which we need in every facet of life, whether or not we are addicted to anything. Hope, strength, and courage is necessary to be a good, true human being. So keep coming back. Don't ever think that you graduated. There's always one step ahead, one step up on the ladder. And we can always rise and increase our humanity, increase our love for others, our consideration, our selflessness. You know, whether we give a great deal of tzedakah or not, when we do give charity, we give of ourselves for recipients who we never know. No animal can do that. That's a unique human trait. To think back of our origins and to think back forward to our future. Yes, we take one day at a time, but that doesn't mean that we don't have a perspective of the future. Right? And the place to get this wonderful knowledge, and the price is tremendous. Where can you get it at such a tremendous admission rate as in the rooms? So I hope I will have a chance to get back into the rooms again. And in the meantime, your blessings will be with me, and my blessings for you will be going out to you, that you enjoy life, a true enjoyment, a true spiritual growth, and taking it one day at a time. Have a chance to give you the chance to ask some questions, make some comments, and as you will, you will be teaching me more. And you will always be my teachers. Do you think that we should consider doing a JRC retreat in Israel sometime soon so you can join us? It's not the same without you. Thank you. Please do. Please do. Question. At this weekend retreat, some of the speakers are rabbis. I understand it's a Jewish Recovery Weekend and why rabbis would be there. But I'm torn. On the one hand, part of the pain in my life comes as a result of things done to me by rabbis. On the other hand, the rabbis were obviously support recovery and acknowledge other problems in our community, but I still find it very hard to listen to them. Yeah, rabbis are human beings. They are prone to the same problems that other people have. And the fact that they have studied and have gained knowledge does not necessarily make them a more spiritual person. It's a tragic comment. But doctors can be highly trained specialists. That doesn't necessarily make them better people. You know, a number of years ago, I decided to alert the Jewish community that there is a problem of spouse abuse in Jewish families. This was not well received. After that, after my book was published, The Shame Born in the Silence, I had to have police protection by my lectures, because people were irate that I was washing our dirty laundry in public. Some stores would not carry the book because the rabbi said they're not allowed to. I have some difficulties with those rabbis, just as you do. But the Torah is not the rabbi. And unfortunately, some doctors make mistakes, some rabbis make mistakes. I think we ought to be careful where we get our guidance from, and not make a general statement, because there are some rabbis who don't use good judgment at all times. Question: do you see people addicted to their phones and electronic devices? Wow. I have taken the step of avoiding a smartphone. I have an old-fashioned phone. I can make a phone call. Watching people who are addicted to their phones and what it has done to them. You know, you can come across 4 young people sitting together, but they're not talking to each other. They're each talking into their phone or texting. It's a serious addiction. And the problem is, there's no 12-step program yet that I know of. Perhaps there is, you can correct me on it. Right? But the truth is that if people would take the 12-step program seriously, right, they could benefit and free themselves of the addiction to the electronics. And there's addiction to computers. And to the youngsters, there's the addiction to the computer games. I think the 12-step program is excellent for our addictions. And if there is a program for addiction to the electronics, then by all means it should be used. But if you can't find one, go to an AA meeting. And when you people talk about alcohol, you hear talking about smartphones. Substitute the word smartphones for alcohol. Substitute smartphones for computer. Right? Substitute alcohol for computers. It's all the same. question to me, why I'm in the 12-step program. Are you an addict? I probably am. I'm not aware of anything that I'm addicted to. But have I changed because of the 12 steps? Of course. All of the things that we talked about before that I learned from the 12-step programs enabled me to implement so much of what I had learned through Jewish ethics. So I think it's... I was here at one meeting in Israel, and someone came along and asked me how long I've been sober. And I felt so wonderful that I identified with him. Right? With the new changes in the legalization of marijuana, how does a parent who is in recovery deal with his children? What is in your genuine opinion about marijuana? First of all, I understand that marijuana is available medicinally, and they tell me, I can't swear to this, they tell me that medicinal marijuana does not provide a high. Okay. Alcohol has been legalized for so many years. How does your parent deal with that? We have to teach our children that giving into desires can be dangerous, can be fatal. I think you have to tell them that one of the things that happens with marijuana, especially for young people, is it causes a loss of motivation. And during the years that they're supposed to be using their energies and their wonderful intelligence to improve themselves, they find that they're blah, until one day they recover to come to the realization that there's something missing in life. So I think we have to teach our children, and we have to teach them by example. Yeah? I think that if we show our children that we are able to set aside sometimes our desires for good reasons, that's a powerful lesson. But if we show them that we give in to everything, if we show them that when we get nervous we pop a pill, now sometimes there are necessary medications like for depression, but so often people at the slightest bit of discomfort, of anxiety, run for a medication. And if we can show our kids, hey, life was not intended to be a bowl of cherries. There are hardships in life, and we have to deal with them. And if we deal with them properly, we can overcome them and can be constructive. If we show them this in our lives, there's the best teaching for avoidance of addiction, including marijuana. Now, I know that people are going to say, well, why is there marijuana any different than alcohol? Well, first of all, it's important to know that if a person is not alcoholic, okay, if he's not alcoholic and he takes a l'chaim, that amount of alcohol is out of his system within an hour. If he takes a reefer, right, that remains in his system for 3 weeks. So I think marijuana is definitely more dangerous. Now, I think that at age 88, if I were offered marijuana for pain relief, I might think, well, I'm not going to improve anymore anyway. Maybe I could justify it. But even now I won't justify it. Right? My brain is the thing that separates me from animal life separates me from stupidity. I'm not going to take a chance with putting stuff into my brain that can have a negative effect on the brain cells, and there's no question that marijuana does that. How do you advise explaining the addiction of a parent to children? We have to be able to teach our children that there are things that happen in life that are not beyond our, that are not within our control. We develop various kinds of illnesses. And one of the illnesses we have is a behavioral illness. And that's what the addictions are. They're behavioral illnesses. And that a person is not responsible for developing an illness. The person is responsible for recovery. And I think that, particularly in a family, if, for example, one spouse is addicted, the other spouse should become a member of the 12-step program for significant others. Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Es-Anon. It's an illness, and again, we're not responsible for the illness, but we have to be responsible for our recovery. And I think that kids can be helped with the tools that are available in Al-Anon. Doesn't mean that the kids have to go to meetings, but we can get the principles of Al-Anon and help our children adopt to the parents' addiction. What did Jewish addicts do before the 12 steps? You know something? It would be nice to believe that there were no Jewish addicts in history, which is so naive. I remember growing up with the phrase, "Shikar is a goy." Drunkenness is only characteristic of non-Jews. Now it's true that drunkenness was frowned upon, nevertheless, people were able to make a kiddush on wine, take a l'chaim when it's appropriate, and stop at the appropriate time. So what did Jewish addicts do before the 12 steps? They unfortunately deteriorated and caused a great deal of grief to themselves and to their families and to the community. Right. But now that the 12 steps are there, we have to take every ability to make them accessible. I'm still very disturbed by the fact that there are some synagogues that will not admit an AA meeting. It's a serious mistake. Would I consider another book on peanut characters? As parents, we need it. I wrote 4 books with the Peanuts comic strips. It's very interesting that Schultz never has any adults in his strips. So that there's one aspect that he did not use his enormous talent. So I don't know that I could do a book on Peanuts again for 2 reasons. First of all, I don't know that that particular material is available. And secondly, the brain that I once had to write those books on peanuts. And that brain is no longer there. Oh, I'm feeling sorry for myself. But I really do not have the kind of thinking ability that we had then. So. Do I have a closing message for the 8th annual recovering retreat attendees? There's only one message I can tell you. Take one day at a time. Keep coming back. The wonderful message of the 12-step program is not only one day at a time, but keep it simple. There's so many difficulties that arise from our complicating things. King Solomon says it, God created man simple, but man complicated it with his own calculations. Right. Thank you, everybody. I hope you do have a JCRC here in Israel. It will give me the opportunity to share it with you.